The mysterious visitor. The bell above the store's door gave a soft chime, a sound Olivia Carter had heard 1,000 times before. She barely looked up from the counter, where she was tallying the day's sales in a worn notebook. Business had been slow, the kind of sluggish pace that made her wonder how much longer she could keep the store open. Carter's Market had once been a bustling little grocery store, a staple in the neighborhood where families shopped for fresh produce, bread, and warm meals. But over the years, things had changed. The once thriving streets now carried an air of desperation. Factories had shut down, jobs had dried up, and people were struggling. More thefts, more hunger, more people scraping by however they could. Olivia had learned to be watchful. She wasn't cold-hearted, she knew some of the shoplifters weren't bad people, just desperate ones. But she had bills to pay, and she couldn't afford to let her kindness ruin her livelihood. Lately, though, something had caught her attention. A shadow at the edge of her store. A presence. A small girl. She had first noticed her lingering outside about a month ago. At first, Olivia thought she was just another child playing in the streets. But the girl never played. She just watched. She would stand near the entrance for long stretches, peeking through the glass windows, eyes scanning the shelves like she was memorizing the layout. At night, when Olivia took out the trash, she would see the girl rummaging through the dumpster behind the store, picking through the bruised apples and discarded bread rolls. She didn't look like the other kids in the neighborhood. There was a ghostly quietness about her, something distant and guarded. She was small, maybe 10 years old, though it was hard to tell because of how frail she looked. Her hoodie was 3 sizes too big, the sleeves covering her hands. Her jeans were patched up with mismatched fabric, and her shoes barely had soles left. It had taken Olivia some time to realize that the girl wasn't just hanging around, she was watching. And then, today, the girl stepped inside for the first time. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. She didn't look up immediately, pretending to stay focused on counting change. Through the corner of her eye, she saw the girl move carefully, her small hands buried in the oversized sleeves of her hoodie. She hesitated near the bread aisle, shifting from foot to foot as if battling some invisible force inside her. Something told Olivia that this was a moment the girl had been rehearsing for days. The girl's hands twitched. Then, in one swift movement, she grabbed a small loaf of bread from the bottom shelf and stuffed it into her hoodie pocket. It was fast, so fast that if Olivia hadn't been watching for it, she might have missed it. She had seen plenty of thefts before, but something about this was different. The girl didn't run. She didn't even look around. Instead, she took a deep breath, exhaled softly, and turned toward the exit, walking as if she were just another customer leaving the store. Olivia knew she should say something. She had confronted shoplifters before. Some yelled at her, some pleaded, some ran. She expected the girl to do one of those things. But when she called out, "Hey!" something unexpected happened. The girl stopped. Just stopped. She didn't bolt for the door. She didn't break into a run like most thieves would. Instead, she turned her head just slightly, her shoulders rising in tension, but she stayed rooted in place. That was when Olivia noticed something that made her chest tighten. The girl was shaking. Not out of fear of being caught, but from something deeper. Something that had settled into her bones long before she ever stepped into Olivia's store. "Turn around," Olivia said gently. The girl hesitated but slowly obeyed. When their eyes met, Olivia saw what she had feared, hunger. Not just the kind that made stomachs growl, but the kind that made people hollow. The girl's lips were cracked, her cheeks gaunt. But it was her eyes that struck Olivia the hardest. They were guarded, wary, but exhausted, like someone who had already given up on the world. She wasn't stealing out of mischief. She was stealing because she had to. Olivia softened her tone. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, then mumbled, Jasmine. Jasmine. A delicate name for a child who looked like she had never been allowed to be delicate. Olivia tapped the counter. Come here. Jasmine swallowed hard but didn't move. I'm not calling the police, Olivia reassured her. But I want to talk. Jasmine took a cautious step forward, her hands clenched tightly inside her sleeves. Olivia gestured toward the hoodie. Show me what you took. Jasmine didn't argue. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the loaf of bread. She placed it on the counter like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Olivia picked up the bread, turning it over in her hands. She wasn't sure what she had expected, maybe for Jasmine to beg or come up with an excuse. But the girl just stood there, silent, waiting for judgment. She had been through this before, Olivia realized. This wasn't the first time she had been caught. And the way she stood, resigned, told Olivia something else. She didn't expect kindness. That realization made Olivia's throat tighten. She placed the bread back in front of Jasmine. Take it. Jasmine blinked, her fingers twitching. What? Take it, Olivia repeated. Jasmine's lips parted in disbelief. But nothing, Olivia interrupted. You're hungry. Take it. Jasmine stared at her like she was trying to figure out the trick. Her small hands finally reached for the bread, hesitant, as if expecting Olivia to snatch it back at the last second. When she had it in her grasp, she took a step back. I don't have money. I know, Olivia said softly. Jasmine swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. Why? Olivia studied her for a moment. Because I want to know why a little girl like you has to steal to eat. Jasmine's body went rigid. A long silence stretched between them before Jasmine did what Olivia had seen too many kids in her situation do. She turned and ran. Olivia let out a slow breath as the door swung shut behind her. She had expected that. She knew the girl wasn't ready to talk. But Olivia wasn't letting this go. That night, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would follow Jasmine. And she would find out the truth. Following the shadows. The next morning, Olivia Carter stood behind the counter of her small grocery store, waiting. She had barely slept the night before. Images of Jasmine's thin frame, the hunger in her eyes, and the way she had run off without looking back kept haunting her. Olivia had seen desperation before, but something about this little girl gnawed at her in a way she couldn't ignore. She had to know the truth. Jasmine had been showing up at the store for weeks, always lingering near the entrance, always watching. That meant she would come back. Olivia was sure of it. And this time, she was ready. The hours dragged on. Customers came and went, the bell above the door ringing intermittently. Olivia forced herself to go through the motions, ringing up groceries, stocking shelves, sweeping the aisles, but her mind was elsewhere, waiting for a small figure in an oversized hoodie. Then, just as the sky turned dusky orange, she saw movement through the window. Jasmine. She was standing across the street, partially hidden behind a bus stop, her small hands stuffed into her sleeves. Her gaze flickered toward the store, hesitant. For a long moment, she just stood there, like she was trying to decide whether to come inside or disappear. Olivia exhaled slowly. She wasn't going to scare her away this time. She grabbed a paper bag, quietly filling it with food, a fresh loaf of bread, a bottle of water, a small pack of peanut butter crackers, and an apple. Something light. Something she could carry. Then, moving as casually as possible, she untied her apron, stepped out from behind the counter, and left the store. Jasmine saw Olivia coming before she had even crossed the street. The girl stiffened immediately, her body language screaming ready to run. Olivia raised both hands in surrender. "I'm not here to yell at you," she said gently. "I just want to talk." Jasmine's eyes darted to the side, searching for an escape. I brought you something, Olivia added quickly, lifting the paper bag just enough for her to see. Jasmine's lips parted slightly, her gaze flickering between Olivia's face and the bag. For a long, excruciating moment, she didn't move. Then, finally, she took one step forward. Another. Her small hands, still buried in the sleeves of her hoodie, twitched. Then, just as Olivia was about to hand over the bag, Jasmine turned and bolted. Damn it, Olivia muttered under her breath. Without thinking, she followed. Jasmine was fast. Despite her small frame, she weaved through the streets with the speed and precision of someone who had done this before, someone who knew how to disappear when necessary. Olivia was no stranger to running. She had spent years chasing after shoplifters in her store, sprinting after teenagers who thought they could outpace her. But this was different. She wasn't chasing Jasmine to punish her. She was chasing her to understand. The streets grew quieter as Olivia followed. The farther they went, the fewer people there were. The bright storefronts faded behind them, replaced by crumbling buildings and boarded-up windows. Jasmine never looked back, never slowed down, until she reached a narrow alleyway. Without hesitation, she slipped through a broken wooden fence and disappeared inside. Olivia hesitated. The alley was dark, uninviting. Trash littered the ground, and a faint smell of dampness and decay filled the air. She looked around. This wasn't a place any child should be. And yet, here Jasmine was. Taking a deep breath, Olivia ducked through the broken fence and stepped inside. At first, she saw nothing but abandoned crates and piles of old newspapers. Then, in the farthest corner of the alley, hidden between two rusted dumpsters, she saw it. A makeshift shelter. A pile of blankets and cardboard formed a crude bed, tucked away in the shadows. A few scattered items lay nearby, a plastic water bottle, a half-eaten granola bar, and a tattered backpack. And there, curled up beneath the blankets, was Jasmine. She wasn't running anymore. She had pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. She was trembling. Olivia felt something crack inside her chest. This wasn't just a lost child. This wasn't just hunger. This was survival. Jasmine had no home. How long have you been here? Olivia asked softly. Jasmine didn't answer. Olivia took another step forward, then crouched down to her level. Do you have anyone? A parent? A guardian? Jasmine flinched. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice so quiet Olivia almost missed it. My mom. A pause. She left. Olivia's stomach twisted. She was supposed to come back, Jasmine whispered. She said she would be back in a few days. How long ago was that? Olivia asked. Jasmine swallowed. 3 weeks. Silence. A deep, painful silence. Olivia exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. 3 weeks. This girl had been alone for 3 weeks, surviving off scraps, hiding in alleys, stealing what little she could. Does anyone know? Olivia asked. Jasmine shook her head. School? I don't go anymore, Jasmine admitted. Her voice was so devoid of emotion, so used to disappointment, that it made Olivia's throat burn. No school. No home. No food. Jasmine had been invisible. Until now. Olivia set the paper bag down next to her. Eat. Jasmine hesitated. I'm not taking no for an answer, Olivia said gently. Slowly, Jasmine reached for the bag. She pulled out the loaf of bread and peeled back the wrapper, tearing off a piece and stuffing it into her mouth. She didn't even chew. She just swallowed. Olivia looked away, giving her a moment. She knew hunger. She had been hungry once, too. She had never forgotten what it felt like. Jasmine, Olivia said after a long pause, I don't know where your mom is, but you can't stay here. Jasmine stiffened. I'm not going to force you to do anything, Olivia reassured her. But I can't walk away knowing you're sleeping in an alley. Jasmine's fingers tightened around the bread. You can come to my store, Olivia continued. You don't have to steal anymore. You can eat. You can be safe. Jasmine shook her head. I don't need help. You do, Olivia countered. And that's okay. A long silence stretched between them. Then, to Olivia's surprise, Jasmine burst into tears. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silent, heartbreaking sobs that racked her small frame. She had held it together for so long. And now, finally, someone saw her. Someone cared. Without hesitation, Olivia reached out, wrapping her arms around the trembling girl. Jasmine stiffened at first, then, slowly, she let herself lean into the warmth. It was the first time in weeks that she had felt safe. And Olivia knew, in that moment, she couldn't just walk away. She wouldn't. Because Jasmine wasn't just another lost child. She was her child now. And Olivia would do whatever it took to save her. A fragile hope. The night air was colder than Olivia expected. Or maybe it just felt that way, knowing that Jasmine had been sleeping here for weeks. The girl was still pressed against Olivia's chest, her small frame trembling. She had cried herself into silence, her body still but not relaxed. She wasn't used to comfort. Olivia ran a soothing hand over Jasmine's back, her heart aching. This wasn't just about food or shelter. This was about trust, something Jasmine had lost long ago. After a while, Olivia spoke, her voice soft but firm. We can't stay here. Jasmine stiffened immediately, pulling away. I'm not going to a shelter, she said quickly, panic flickering in her eyes. They'll take me away. Put me in foster care. The fear in her voice sent a chill down Olivia's spine. How do you know that? Olivia asked carefully. Jasmine hesitated, her fingers curling into her sleeves. It happened before. A lump formed in Olivia's throat. You were in the system? Jasmine nodded. Before my mom came back for me. And now she's gone again, Olivia murmured. Jasmine flinched. She wasn't ready to face that truth yet. Olivia could see it in her eyes. I won't let them take you, Olivia promised. But you can't sleep in an alley. Jasmine swallowed hard, her gaze darting toward the opening of the alley, as if calculating an escape route. Just for tonight, Olivia said quickly. Come back with me. Eat something warm. Take a shower. Get some sleep in a real bed. No one will know. No one will take you. Jasmine bit her lip, her body tense with indecision. Then, finally, she whispered, just for tonight. Olivia nodded, standing up and offering her hand. Jasmine hesitated, then placed her small, freezing fingers in Olivia's palm. And together, they stepped out of the darkness. A new kind of silence. The walk back to Olivia's house was quiet. Jasmine kept her head down, her hoodie pulled tight over her face, as if expecting someone to stop them. Olivia didn't push. She knew better than to force conversation. When they arrived, Olivia unlocked the door and stepped inside, flipping on the lights. Jasmine froze in the doorway. She looked, overwhelmed. It wasn't that Olivia's house was extravagant. It was small but cozy, a mix of warm wooden furniture, soft rugs, and books stacked in corners. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon lingered in the air from a candle Olivia had forgotten to blow out earlier. Jasmine stood there, her wide eyes scanning every detail, as if trying to memorize it. You can come in, Olivia said gently. Jasmine took a cautious step inside. Olivia set the paper bag of food on the kitchen counter, then turned to her. "You hungry?" Jasmine nodded. Olivia smiled. "All right. You sit, I cook." Jasmine didn't argue. She slid into a chair at the kitchen table, her hands resting stiffly in her lap. As Olivia moved around the kitchen, cracking eggs and buttering toast, she watched Jasmine out of the corner of her eye. The girl's shoulders remained tense, like she expected something to go wrong. Like warmth and kindness weren't things she was used to. When Olivia placed a plate in front of her, scrambled eggs, toast, and a bowl of fresh fruit, Jasmine stared at it for a moment, as if afraid it might disappear. Then, without a word, she picked up a fork and started eating. Not like she had in the alley, rushed and desperate. But slower. More controlled. Like she was savoring every bite. Olivia didn't speak. She just let Jasmine eat. Some things didn't need words. The first night. After dinner, Olivia led Jasmine to the bathroom. "You can shower here," she said, handing her a clean towel and a pair of pajamas that might be a little big but would be warm. "No rush. Take as long as you need." Jasmine hesitated, gripping the towel tightly. "Thank you." The words were so quiet Olivia almost didn't hear them. She smiled. "You're welcome." Jasmine disappeared into the bathroom, and for the first time that night, Olivia exhaled. She ran a hand through her hair, feeling the weight of everything settling in. Jasmine had nowhere to go. No one looking for her. No one keeping her safe. The thought made Olivia's stomach turn. She couldn't just let her go back to that alley. She wouldn't. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. Jasmine stood in the doorway, her hair damp, wearing the oversized pajamas. She looked so small. "I made up the couch for you," Olivia said. "There's blankets and pillows." Jasmine hesitated. "I can sleep on the floor." "I don't want to be a problem." Olivia's heart clenched. "You're not a problem," she said firmly. "You're a kid. And kids deserve a safe place to sleep." Jasmine didn't argue. She walked over to the couch, sitting down carefully, as if afraid to disturb anything. Olivia pulled the blanket over her shoulders. "If you need anything, I'll be right in the next room." Jasmine gave a small nod. For a moment, Olivia thought she wouldn't say anything else. But then, just as Olivia turned to leave. "Good night." The word was fragile, uncertain. Like Jasmine wasn't sure if she was allowed to say it. Olivia smiled. "Good night, Jasmine." Then she turned off the light, letting the girl rest in the safety of a home for the first time in a long, long time. An unspoken decision. That night, Olivia lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't temporary. She knew it. Jasmine might have only agreed to stay for one night, but Olivia had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let her go back to the streets. She would find a way to keep her safe. Even if it meant fighting the system. Even if it meant risking everything. Because some children slipped through the cracks. And if no one else was going to catch Jasmine, then Olivia would. A battle begins. A morning unlike any other. The sun had barely risen when Olivia woke up, the scent of coffee filling the air. She blinked, confused. She hadn't set the coffee maker. For a moment, panic gripped her chest. Then she heard soft shuffling from the kitchen. Throwing on her robe, Olivia stepped into the hallway. There, standing on a step stool, was Jasmine, her small hands carefully holding a spoon as she stirred something in a pot on the stove. For a moment, Olivia just watched. The girl was standing so still, so focused, as if she were afraid of doing something wrong. Beside her, on the counter, was a cup of coffee, already prepared. Olivia swallowed hard. Jasmine had made it for her. Clearing her throat, she stepped forward. "You're up early." Jasmine jumped, nearly dropping the spoon. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to." Olivia quickly held up a hand. "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong." Jasmine hesitated, then stepped down from the stool, looking uncertain. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You let me sleep here. You fed me. I wanted to help." Olivia's chest tightened. This child had been surviving alone for so long that kindness felt like something she had to repay. But that wasn't how love worked. "You don't have to do anything," Olivia said softly. "You're not here because you owe me something, Jasmine. You're here because you deserve to be safe." Jasmine bit her lip. Olivia saw the hesitation, the deep-rooted fear of believing that good things could last. But she didn't push. Instead, she walked to the counter and picked up the coffee Jasmine had made. She took a sip, then smiled. "Best coffee I've had in years." Jasmine's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Almost. It was a start. Digging for answers. As Jasmine finished the simple breakfast she had made, oatmeal with sliced bananas, Olivia sat down at the table. She needed to know more. Not to pressure Jasmine, but to protect her. "So, you said your mom came back for you before," Olivia started gently. Jasmine stiffened. "Where is she now?" For a long moment, Jasmine didn't answer. Then, slowly, she looked up. "I don't know." Her voice was flat. Emotionless. "She just left." Olivia frowned. "Did she say where she was going?" "No." Jasmine pushed the spoon around her bowl, avoiding Olivia's eyes. "But she's coming back, right?" Olivia asked carefully. Jasmine went still. Then, finally, she whispered, "She said she would." Olivia's stomach twisted. She had heard that tone before. The quiet, fragile hope of a child who knew, deep down, that she had been abandoned. But Olivia didn't say that. Instead, she reached across the table, placing her hand over Jasmine's. "If she does, I'll help you find her." Jasmine's fingers twitched, as if wanting to pull away. But she didn't. She just nodded. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was something. A dangerous truth. That afternoon, after making sure Jasmine was comfortable watching TV with a warm blanket, Olivia did what she had been avoiding. She pulled out her laptop and started digging. If Jasmine had been in the foster system before, there had to be records. And if her mother had vanished, there had to be a reason. It didn't take long to find something. Missing persons report, Elaine Carter, age 33. Last seen 3 months ago. Child potentially at risk. Olivia's heart pounded. 3 months. Jasmine had been on her own that long? But there was more. Elaine Carter had been in and out of jail for drug possession. Her last arrest had been 6 months ago, and she had been released just weeks before disappearing. Olivia clenched her fists. She had wanted to believe Jasmine's mother had left for a good reason. But now, she wasn't so sure. Then she found something even worse. CPS had been looking for Jasmine. Olivia's hands tightened around the mouse. Jasmine was considered a missing child. And if Olivia took her to the police, they would put her back in the system. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Jasmine had already been through so much. If she went back into foster care, there was no guarantee she'd be safe. No guarantee she wouldn't end up worse off. Olivia exhaled, closing the laptop. There had to be another way. She had to find a way to keep Jasmine safe, without handing her over to a system that had already failed her once. But time was running out. If the wrong person realized Jasmine was missing, she could be taken away. And Olivia refused to let that happen. A choice with no easy answer. That evening, Olivia sat beside Jasmine on the couch, watching her fall asleep. The girl's face was peaceful, but her hands were still curled into fists, as if ready to defend herself. Even in sleep, she was on guard. Olivia brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, her heart aching. She had made up her mind. Tomorrow, she would start making calls. Not to the police, but to a lawyer. Because Olivia wasn't going to let Jasmine disappear into the system again. She was going to fight for her. No matter what it took. No matter what it cost. Fighting for Jasmine. A new kind of fear. Olivia had always considered herself brave. She had built her grocery store from the ground up, faced break-ins, dealt with difficult customers, and survived financial struggles. But this was different. This fear wasn't for herself. It was for Jasmine. A child who had already been abandoned by the system once. A child Olivia now felt responsible for. As she sat on her couch that night, staring at the flickering light in her living room, she tried to think rationally. If Jasmine was legally considered missing, then Olivia was technically harboring her. That meant if she went to the authorities without a plan, Jasmine could be taken away immediately. No second chances. No questions asked. But there had to be a way around it. There had to be something she could do. And Olivia wasn't going to stop until she found it. The first call. The next morning, Olivia woke up early, made sure Jasmine was still asleep, and then sat at her kitchen table with her phone in hand. She needed help. And she knew just the person to call. After 3 rings, the voice of Daniel Carter, her longtime friend and a well-respected lawyer, came through the line. Olivia? This is a surprise. She wasted no time. Dan, I need your help. And I need you to promise you won't go to the police before I explain everything. There was a pause. Then, that's an interesting way to start a conversation. I'm serious, she pressed. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Another silence. Then, all right. Talk to me. Olivia took a deep breath and told him everything. About Jasmine. About how she had been stealing food. About how she had followed her and found her living alone. About the missing persons report. And about how Olivia refused to let her go back to a system that had failed her. When she was finished, Dan exhaled sharply. This is a mess, Olivia. I know. You realize what you're doing could be considered unlawful, right? I don't care, she said firmly. I just want to do what's right for her. Dan sighed. She's not your child, Liv. If her mother is missing and CPS is looking for her, they have the right to step in. But they'll just throw her into another foster home, Olivia argued. And what if it's worse than the last one? Dan was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, there might be a way. Olivia sat up straighter. I can file for emergency guardianship. Her heart leapt. But, he continued, it's not that simple. You'll need proof that you can provide for her. That she's safer with you than anywhere else. I can do that, Olivia said quickly. Whatever it takes. Dan sighed. All right. I'll start the paperwork. But Liv, be careful. If someone else reports her before we get this sorted out, things could get a lot worse. I understand. As she hung up the phone, Olivia let out a slow breath. There was hope. But it was a race against time. And she wasn't sure if she would win. A false sense of security. Over the next few days, Olivia worked tirelessly to build her case. She collected financial records to prove she could support Jasmine. She documented everything, her living conditions, her education, even medical records from a nearby clinic where Olivia had taken her for a checkup. And all the while, she tried to act normal. Jasmine didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. And Olivia wanted to keep it that way. She wanted Jasmine to feel safe. To feel like, for once, someone was fighting for her. But the fear never left Olivia's chest. Because all it would take was one mistake. One wrong move. And Jasmine could be taken away forever. The unexpected visitor. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Olivia was in the back of the store, stocking shelves, when the doorbell chimed. She glanced up, expecting a customer. But instead, standing in the doorway, was a man in a black suit. And beside him, holding a clipboard, was a woman with a government badge clipped to her jacket. Her heart stopped. CPS. For a split second, panic seized her. Had someone reported Jasmine? Had they already found out? The woman gave a polite but firm smile. Ms. Hudson? Olivia swallowed hard. Yes? My name is Karen Lewis, and this is my colleague Officer Maxwell. We're with Child Protective Services. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Her hands clenched into fists. This was it. This was the moment she had been dreading. She forced herself to breathe. Stay calm. Act natural. Of course, she said, forcing a smile. What can I do for you? Karen glanced around the store. We've received a report about a missing child who may have been seen around here. A young girl named Jasmine Carter. Do you know anything about that? Olivia's stomach turned to stone. Someone had reported her. But who? Had a customer noticed Jasmine in the store? Had she slipped up somewhere? Every possible explanation raced through her mind. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let them take Jasmine. Not now. Not when she was so close to giving her a real home. So she did the only thing she could. She lied. I'm sorry, she said, shaking her head. I see a lot of kids come through here. I don't think I've seen her. Karen studied her carefully. Beside her, Officer Maxwell was silent, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if looking for something, or someone. Olivia held her breath. Then, finally, Karen sighed. All right, she said. If you do see anything, please let us know. It's important that she's found and placed in a safe environment. Olivia nodded. Of course. Then, with one last glance around, they turned and left. The door shut behind them. And Olivia collapsed against the counter, her hands shaking. She had just lied to Child Protective Services. If they found out, she could be arrested. And Jasmine. Jasmine would be taken away for good. She had won this round. But the battle wasn't over yet. Because now, they were watching. And Olivia had to be smarter than ever if she wanted to keep Jasmine safe. The final battle for Jasmine. A night of restless fear. After Olivia closed the store that night, she locked every door and window, double-checking them over and over again. Jasmine was in the back room, playing with an old stuffed bear Olivia had found in storage. She looked peaceful. Unaware. But Olivia couldn't shake the terror clawing at her chest. CPS had been here. They were watching her now. Every second that passed felt like a ticking bomb. If someone, anyone, gave them a reason to be suspicious, they'd be back. And next time, they wouldn't leave empty-handed. She had never felt so helpless. But she wasn't giving up. She couldn't. Jasmine had no one else. And Olivia would be damned if she let the system take her away. She just needed a plan. An unexpected confession. The next morning, Olivia made a crucial decision. She needed answers. Someone had tipped CPS off. And she had a strong suspicion who it was. So instead of heading straight to work, she walked 2 blocks down to Maggie's cafe, where she knew her closest neighbor, Mrs. Lillian Carter, ate breakfast every morning. Mrs. Carter was a talker. She knew everything about everyone. And Olivia had a feeling she had played a part in this mess. Sure enough, she found the elderly woman sitting by the window, sipping her morning tea, her gray curls bouncing as she chatted with another customer. Olivia approached the table, forcing a smile. "Morning, Mrs. Carter." The woman beamed. "Oh, Olivia. What a surprise. Join me?" Olivia slid into the seat across from her. Straight to the point. "Did you report Jasmine to CPS?" Mrs. Carter froze mid-sip. Then, slowly, she set her cup down. She didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed. "Sweetheart, I didn't mean to cause trouble for you," she said gently. "But I saw the girl sneaking in and out of your store, and when I heard about the missing persons report on the news, I put 2 and 2 together." Olivia clenched her fists. "You don't understand." "Honey, I do," Mrs. Carter interrupted. "You're a good woman. And I know you only want to help that child. But this isn't just about what you want. It's about what's legal. And if the authorities find out you're hiding her, they won't care about your reasons. They'll take her away anyway." Olivia's chest burned with frustration. But Mrs. Carter wasn't finished. She reached across the table, squeezing Olivia's hand. "I know someone who can help." Olivia blinked. "What?" "I have a friend, Judge Robert Marshall, who handles family court cases," she explained. "He owes me a favor. If you're serious about keeping Jasmine, I can get you in front of him." Olivia's heart leapt. A judge. A real chance. She grabbed Mrs. Carter's hands. "Please," she whispered. "Whatever it takes. Just help me save her." The courtroom gamble. 2 days later, Olivia sat in a stiff leather chair, her hands shaking in her lap. Judge Robert Marshall sat behind a massive wooden desk, flipping through the documents Dan had filed for emergency guardianship. Jasmine sat beside Olivia, looking terrified. Across the room, a CPS representative sat with folded arms. "I have read the request for emergency custody," the judge finally said. "And I have also reviewed the child's history in the foster system." He turned his sharp eyes toward Jasmine. "Jasmine, would you like to stay with Miss Hudson?" Jasmine hesitated. Then, in the smallest voice, she whispered, "Yes." Olivia squeezed her hand. The CPS worker immediately interjected. "Your Honor, Miss Hudson did not go through legal channels to shelter this child. She actively avoided notifying authorities, which raises questions about." Judge Marshall held up a hand. "I understand your concerns. But let's address the real issue, the welfare of the child." He turned back to Olivia. "Miss Hudson, why didn't you report Jasmine when you found her?" Olivia stood up. Her voice was steady. "Because the system failed her once already," she said. "She was placed in a home where she wasn't safe. And if I had called CPS immediately, she would have been thrown into another random placement, without anyone knowing if it was better or worse." She took a deep breath. "I'm not saying I handled things perfectly. But I was trying to do what was right. Not just what was legal." The judge studied her for what felt like forever. Then he sighed. "This is not a simple case." He scribbled something down. "I will not revoke Miss Hudson's rights for attempting to protect the child. However, the child's long-term placement must still be assessed. For now, I am granting temporary guardianship to Olivia Hudson while an investigation is conducted." Olivia's breath hitched. Temporary guardianship. It wasn't permanent, but it was a win. Jasmine grabbed onto Olivia's arm, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you," Olivia whispered. The judge nodded. "This isn't over yet," the CPS worker warned. But Olivia didn't care. She had bought time. And she was going to fight for Jasmine until the very end. A new beginning. That night, Olivia tucked Jasmine into bed for the first time. Her own bed. A bed that was hers. "You don't have to be scared anymore," Olivia whispered, brushing Jasmine's curls back. "I'm not going anywhere." Jasmine blinked up at her. Then, slowly, she whispered. "You promise?" Olivia's throat tightened. She leaned down, kissing Jasmine's forehead. "I promise." And for the first time in her life, Jasmine fell asleep knowing she was truly safe.